Kennedy's closest aide, other than probably Kenneth O'Donnell. This was his quote after witnessing this event. This is what David Powers said. He said, "We used to salute around the White House a lot. Heads of state used to come into the White House and John would be in the balcony, even as a little boy, and he'd see them all saluting. He was always great at saluting, except sometimes he would salute with his left hand. But on this day, he was perfect." Okay, now, the question might be, oh, seems like a pretty famous picture. I wonder who took that picture. I wonder what the story is behind that picture. Well, here it is. This is really has an interesting twist to this, and I'm just amazed. So who took this famous picture? God, do you think this picture, I will tell you, it did not win a Pulitzer Prize, but would you think it might be capable of it? Well, you'd think so. I wonder, you'd really wonder in your mind what picture in the world would ever be better than that one. But anyway, we'll read through this. Daily News iconic photo of JFK Jr.'s salute to Dad's coffin still haunts. The image of a courageous little boy saluting his slain father's casket touched the heart of a grieving nation, and it marked photographer Dan Farrell's life forever. In A Life in Pictures, Farrell's most famous photo was the one of John F. Kennedy Jr. saluting his father's coffin near St. Matthew's Cathedral after the funeral mass in Washington. The image was taken on November 25, 1963, 3 days after President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, and 1 day before it ran on the cover of the Daily News and became an indelible part of the national consciousness. "It was the saddest thing I've ever seen in my whole life," said Farrell, 83 of Long Island, who was working as a staff photographer at the News when he snapped the famous shot. On that fateful day nearly 50 years ago, the veteran newsman was sent on a moment's notice to cover the funeral of JFK, who'd been shot to death while riding through Daley Plaza in an open convertible beside his wife. After the service, JFK's family paused on the cathedral steps, and his widow leaned over to her son and whispered to him to salute his dad one last time. It was the boy's 3rd birthday. He barely had time to know his father, but the expression of fortitude on his adorable face echoed perfectly. The News only headline that day, which simply read, "We carry on." The photo of young John standing with Jacqueline Kennedy, his sister Caroline, and uncles Robert and Edward became the best remembered image of the funeral. Farrell almost didn't get the shot. He had only about 2 seconds to take the photo from the time John Jr. lifted his arm to salute to the time he put it back down. He used a bulky Hasselblad 1000 to take the image from about 150 feet away. The roll of film he used allowed for 12 exposures, and the salute was the only image on the roll. I took a deep breath. I'm holding this crazy camera, and I've got it, I don't know what that means, pinky, and I tripped it with one shot, Farrell said. That was it, a one-shot deal. Farrell was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize for the photograph, but lost to Bob Jackson, the photographer who captured an image of the moment Ruby shot Oswald. How would you like to take a picture that's so famous and you had such good pictures taken that you lose to the picture that was taken the day before? Isn't that incredible? Farrell went on to cover countless other stories in his 50-year career as a newsman, but nothing he ever shot reached the level of his photo of JFK's mass and the toddler who kept a brave face despite his dad's shocking death. "I knew it was a good picture, this I knew, but I didn't know to what extent it would be," said Farrell, who keeps a framed copy of the image mounted in his home. "I'm just glad my emotions didn't take over when I was trying to take the picture." Pretty interesting. The reason I take you to St. Matthew's Cathedral is for 3 reasons. I think it's very important that you see where the President's casket laid during the funeral. I think it's equally important that you have the opportunity to stand and see the bottom of those stairs where John Kennedy Jr. gave that famous salute. I also think it's important, especially for our Catholic kids, to see the cathedral in general, because it's a beautiful, beautiful building. So we will get a chance to do that. Well, moving on, after this emotional event at the church, the processional continues its journey from the church to Arlington National Cemetery. At 2:54 p.m., the processional arrives at Arlington. When the processional reaches the burial site, the Marine Band played the Star-Spangled Banner. When the processional reached the burial site, the Marine Band played the Star-Spangled Banner. One of the people in that band was a sousaphone player by the name of Ed Simmons. And this is what Ed Simmons was quoted as saying about his experience. He said, "I thought as we were going up to the gravesite, because it was quite a steep hill, that my God, there are muscles I haven't used in months. Probably what sticks in my mind the most was the casket, the humongous weight of it, seeing these body bearers struggling to carry it up the hill to the gravesite. It was really a struggle." Now when we get to DC, we will start our ascent to the Kennedy gravesite, and it's uphill. This is what he's talking about. And I'll guarantee you, by the time we get there, you'll be going, gee, that's got my calves kind of stiff, because it's a pretty good walk. It's not a long ways, but it's uphill quite a bit. He played the sousaphone, whatever that is. There you go, okay. Now, after the Marine Band completed the Star-Spangled Banner, the United States Air Force Pipe Band, including member Jerry Cashin, played a tune called Mist-Covered Mountain. Why would they have the Air Force Pipe Band there? What's a pipe band? Anybody know? You musicians? Yeah, it's Irish, and so it's in tribute to his Irish heritage. So the Irish Pipe Band, or whatever, plays Mist-Covered Mountain. While this is going on, the casket is removed from the horse-drawn caisson and carried by the casket bearers to the gravesite. And as this is kind of interesting, as the president's body is being placed on the gravesite, 50 fighter jets, one representing each of the states, flies low over the burial site in Arlington. 50 fighter jets. You just see them, you'll see them on tape. Once those 50 fighter jets flew by, what flew by next in a final tribute to the president? No? That's an Air Force view. He's a Navy guy. What plane followed the 50 fighter jets? Air Force One. And when it flew over, it tipped its wing to the president and continued. So the 50 fighter jets come over, Air Force One comes and tips its wing toward the president and continues flight. Assistant Press Secretary Malcolm Kilduff, remember the guy that announced Kennedy's death? He was there, and this is what he was quoted as saying about this experience. He said, "Suddenly, seeing this flight of fighters came across, just screaming jets with one plane missing from formation, was heart-wrenching. Then Air Force One coming from the same way. I never saw a plane that size fly so low in my life, and it came over and tipped its wings before taking off and gaining altitude." That'd be pretty cool. That was followed by a 21-gun cannon salute. What's a 21-gun cannon salute? Just cannons firing 21 times. 21-gun cannon salute followed the fighter jets. And once the 21-gun cannon salute ended, then 7 riflemen, firing 3 volleys apiece, concluded with a final 21-gun salute. Obviously, 7 riflemen firing 3 shots apiece. You'll see that on tape. Now this is where it gets kind of interesting. Anybody know what TAPS is? Okay, the final tribute, the final thing that happens is the playing of taps. And the man that was chosen to play taps was Army Bugler Sergeant Keith Clark. He was the man that was assigned to play taps. He was the lead trumpet player in the United States Army Band. Andy Denise, is this kind of hitting home a little maybe? Aren't you a trumpet guy?
No.
You're not?
No, I play the trombone.
Oh, trombone. Any trumpeters in here? Well, anyway. Now this is what's interesting about this. Keith Clark was called early that day, and told that he would be sounding taps at the funeral. And this is what he was later quoted as saying about this. He said, "So I was there to play at 12:15 p.m. It was a rainy day and we weren't allowed to wear overcoats, so I stood there in the drizzle for about 3 hours. It's like the Speaker of the House saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States." When Trump gives his State of the Union, the Speaker of the House will stand up while everybody's in session. He'll say, "Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States." And then he'll come out. Clark's point is in his quote, that is not at all hard to say. Anyway, I just said it, not very hard. But to do it then, to do it there, is when the pressure comes. Meaning that he can play taps all day long. But when you do it at that moment, under those circumstances, that's when it becomes difficult all of a sudden. A lot of people can sing in the shower. And what's he mean by that? We said that'll be, I can sing like crazy in the shower. I'm not sure I would be willing to get up in front of people and sing and have people watch me. Well, to be in view of television cameras, they ordered Clark to stand 5 yards from those riflemen who were firing that 21-gun salute. And after they got done, at 3:08, what was his hearing like? Not very good. You know, that'd be interesting. I've never really played an instrument, but if you could not hear, would it be difficult? Yeah. I know if you sing, if you can't hear yourself, you'd probably be wondering what you were doing, wouldn't you not, if it's good or not? Well, as he's playing taps, on the 6th note, he flutters off key. Very distinct, and I'll show it to you. So on the 6th note of taps, Sergeant Clark flutters off key, and then goes on to complete taps without a flaw. Now, most people would be embarrassed that they were off key, right? Most people say I screwed up, and he might have. But I got to tell you a couple stories here that we're going to watch it. After this, an author by the name of William Manchester wrote a book called The Death of a President. Very, very famous book. I have several copies of it, but I certainly have one in here. And this is how he wrote in his book about the broken note. That's what they call it, the broken note. So in the book Death of a President, written by William Manchester, Manchester wrote how the broken note would be, quote, widely regarded as a deliberate effect, like a catch in your voice or swiftly stifled sob. When Clark was later asked about the broken note, he simply said, "I missed a note under pressure." The bugle that he played taps with is on display at Arlington. You will have an opportunity to see that bugle when you are there. Now, I want you to listen to this and just listen very carefully, and I think this sums it up. A guy by the name of Tom Sherlock, in 2001, he was the senior historian at the time at Arlington National Cemetery, and he thought that Sergeant Clark's flawed sounding of taps, or his broken note, was entirely fitting for the situation. This is what he said. He said, "It showed the tension that the nation felt. It's part of the emotion. It's when a speech is well delivered and a voice cracks because it's an emotional time. It's what should happen. And in that way, it almost personalized it. And it made it immortal." I think it's pretty cool. I'm going to show it to you now on this video. It's not very long. But what has happened here is going to show you the broken note. I think you'll pick it up and show you Sergeant Clark. But the significance of it, it was one of the many things that they talked about in the 50th anniversary of the Kennedy assassination. And there was a young boy that was there that watched Clark miss the note and later wrote him a letter of encouragement. You know, don't worry about what you did, right? And on the 50th anniversary, they got all kinds of buglers there to play it again, and he showed up later at ages 60 or 60-something. So it's pretty cool. But anyway, you'll hear the broken note.
Wait,
now, go ahead.
When they did the, like, 55 years, did they all miss that note?
No, they purposely played it perfect. You see it. It's pretty good. But he came to see it because he had been there when it wasn't played. So go ahead there, if you would, for me, please, Ryland, and get the... Okay, I'm going to go ahead and let this record on our lecture today too, in case you want to see it again, because it really is not that long, but I'd like you to see it. Okay, here we go.
YouTube TV. Watch like a fan.
We are preparing to mark the 50th anniversary of the John F. Kennedy assassination next Friday, an event composed of so many moments seared into our national consciousness. Not all of them were seen. Some were heard. That was Army bugler Keith Clark, the lone bugler sounding taps at Arlington that day. He missed the sixth note, and the broken note struck many listening as the sound of a broken heart. Today, 100 buglers gathered at Arlington to play taps, this time hitting the sixth note and every other one just perfectly.
It's kind of, it's getting to me a little bit.
Among those watching 50 years ago was a young boy in Ohio, an aspiring trumpeter named Ed Hunter. He wrote Sergeant Clark a note of support. Keith Clark died 11 years ago, but today, a 60-year-old Ed Hunter sat front row at Arlington, watching and listening to taps being played.
Kind of cool, huh? Maybe we'll watch this real quick, like, since we talked about it.
Your most iconic moment of the aftermath of JFK's assassination? Was it John John's salute to his father's casket? Was it Jackie Kennedy refusing to take off the blood-stained pink suit, a favorite focus of Kennedy movies?
We can get someone to bring you a change of clothes from the plane.
No, I want them to see what they've done to Jack.
But my most persistent memory was something else. For me, the early 60s were a time of transition. I went from long hair to short hair, said goodbye to my pigtails. These pigtails, my mom actually saved them. And in my baby book for 1963, there was this notation, took Kennedy death seriously. What caught the eye of this 9-year-old girl was a horse, of course. A riderless horse with empty boots reversed in the stirrups, as if the rider were looking back over his past life. The horse was named Blackjack, and the 19-year-old holding him was Army Private First Class Andy Carlson.
My skinny little arm was trying to control all of that horse.
Blackjack had a reputation as a hot horse. He got this job because he was too wild to ride. And after leading him about 14 miles, 2 days in a row, following behind JFK's casket on the caisson,
I felt beaten there to death and worn out.
I was so taken with Blackjack that after the funeral, I wrote a poem about the riderless horse. Don't worry, it disappeared over the years, so you won't be subjected to the poetic ramblings of a kid.
At one point, he was pawing the paving, and he struck the toe of my right shoe. I wanted to fall down and roll around on the ground and cry, but couldn't do that.
The riderless horse made an impression on Mrs. Kennedy. She later asked for his saddle, bridle, boots, and saber. Blackjack died in 1976 and was buried with military honors. He's been immortalized as a statue, by a book. He's even on Facebook. Famous for chomping at the bit while playing more than a bit part.
In the middle of all this solemnity, there's one fool horse having the time of his life.
Seems like JFK would have liked that. Ginny Mo, CNN, New York.
Kennedy's, just would tell you that President Kennedy, that picture of the horse kind of consuming him a little bit, that was at their place where Jackie was quite into horses for the kids, and that happened just the weekend before he was assassinated. I'm going to quickly save this to show the other class because I didn't realize that blackjack thing was on there. It's pretty good. Did you like it?
gone to the place where he did it. I can understand why. Well, no, I didn't. I don't know why they keep him for that long.
Okay, we'll continue on here. And try to get through it just a little bit more, so we're at the start of a new subtopic here. Okay, after the playing of taps, the American flag that had been draped over the president's casket this whole time was folded by those 8 casket bearers and given to Mrs. Kennedy. So after the playing of taps, the 8 casket bearers folded up the American flag that had covered the president's coffin and presented that to Mrs. Kennedy. At 3:13 p.m., Jackie Kennedy and Robert Kennedy and Ted Kennedy all took turns lighting what we know today as the eternal flame. So at 3:13 p.m. on November 25th, 1963, Jackie Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, and Ted Kennedy all take turns lighting what we know as today as the eternal flame. After the burial, the Kennedy party left Arlington, but Clint Hill escorted both Jackie and Robert back up to the burial site later that evening because they wanted a private moment without all the other people there. And according to Clint Hill, both Robert Kennedy and Jackie